Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who don't like these kind of videos, you saw the title of the video when you clicked on it. But for those of you who do enjoy these, if you guys would please click a like down below to offset the dislikes, that would be greatly appreciated. And yes, this video is coming out a little late, but I've had several people come and ask me on social media. They're like, Jason, what do you think about AlphaDestiny and his 420 yellow slingshot bench? That's a good question. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 hat of speechcraft and let's talk about this. All right. I'm going to give credit where credit is due, and I'm going to be fair. Alex is a pretty strong guy in his upper body, right? I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. He obviously has quite a few years of lifting now, upper body lifts. He's specialized in it. He's gotten pretty strong at it. One of the reasons I disrespect him has to do with his refusal to really train his lower body. He's admitted in the past his own insecurity about his height. And those are his words, are why he doesn't want big legs. He's insecure about his height. That's a ridiculous reason because you're leaving so many gains off the table with that. And because if we're going to talk about being strong and being athletic and strength sports and everything else, I mean, you guys need to be squatting. And I'm not saying it has to just be like a low bar power lifter back squat. I mostly box squat these days, right? Not really a big deal, but people need to be squatting. You need to be pulling from the floor. And he doesn't. He does partial deadlifts and he doesn't squat. And so I've always disrespected him for that, but his upper body is strong and no one's going to deny that. But we kind of come back to the point of, if we're going to compare it, let's be realistic about what the strength level is there. Be real what the strength level is there. What do we know his bench is as of now? I'm not talking about back when he was competing, not talking about when he hit his bench numbers. What did he bench? And I think it was about 340 with Jeff Nippard, right? When they went in and benched together. And some people were, I think, were trying to say, well, he didn't hit higher. He missed some of those lifts. Those wouldn't have counted in comp. And that's all we care about. What's a meet legal bench, right? He competes as a meet legal bencher, does he not? Same with me. It's what I do. I'm not concerned with what someone's touch and go is or their reverse slingshot, board press. None of that matters, guys. If we're comparing different people's strength, if you want to say how strong is person A next to person B or whatever, you got to have standardized lifts. And a meet legal bench is a valid standardized lift. It's a good way to assess. And someone who is brutally strong is going to be brutally strong on the bench even if they don't have the greatest technique in the world. They can still walk over and pause bench and lock out a really heavy weight even if they don't specialize in it. So it's not just a powerlifting thing. It's a good test of upper body strength. And Alex has a pretty strong bench. I mean, nobody's going to deny that. So he's sitting at around a 340 bench. So when someone goes and they take something like the yellow slingshot and go, but this is 4, no, he's a 340 bencher. And that will show you guys there how much this yellow slingshot is adding. It's a form of accommodating resistance. And you guys see me do accommodating resistance, right? If I walk over and loop a band under 405 and bench it, does that mean I'm a 405 bencher? No, it means I can lock out 405 with enough inertia out of the bottom. And I don't think people understand how much tension we get from bands and things. Like, you guys have seen me do deadlifts with 200 pounds of band tension at the top. Do you think you can loop enough bands under? With the bands I have, I could easily get 200 pounds of tension under a bar and do a reverse bench with it. Well, if I'm taking 200 pounds off the bottom to help me slingshot a weight a little bit, isn't that going to make the lockout easier? Of course it is. I'm going to be able to lock a lot more weight than I'd be able to bench. Of course I would. Well, the slingshot does a similar thing, and I'm not saying a slingshot's a useless tool. I'm saying it's a useless judge of strength. It's a useless judge of strength. And again, let's come back over to max effort style training. If you're going to run a conjugate type system, and I know he sort of, kind of, a little bit does this for upper body only, yeah, you rotate through different lifts, and so you mark your PRs. And so if you do benching with chains and you've hit, 300 with 70 pounds of chains, then you want a PR on that next time you come around to do that lift again. If you're reverse, well, I'm calling it a reverse band. A slingshot is similar to a reverse band. If your red slingshot max bench is 400 and you get 405 next time, then you mark that as a PR. If it's with the yellow one is 410 and you get 420, the next time you mark that as a PR, and that's fine. That's acceptable for your comparison there. But I think where a lot of newer lifters, and let's be honest here, most of the people who are going to take Alex seriously and watch his channel seriously are novice lifters who don't train their legs. Okay, they're novice lifters who don't train their legs. Take guys, apparently people tell me that Mindwire guy came back, he's making gains again now that he left Naturally Enhanced. Naturally Enhanced is a terrible program. Okay, Alex probably knows more about training now than he did back then. So let's assume, and people will say, well, I think he's growing and learning and some of his stuff is better, and that's fine. Of course, it should be, hopefully. Over time, we all learned, we all improved. And I'm not even going to say that we should always really hammer people for past mistakes when they've improved and moved on, because it's not always fair to do so. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Realistically, it isn't. It isn't always fair. Someone was younger and putting out bad programs, and maybe they don't want to admit they were bad. I'm not going to say that's a good thing, because they probably need to admit this was really terrible programming. Maybe I should adjust it. But they're making money on it, and it was really bad programming, and Alex still had a hell of a lot to learn then, and he still has a hell of a lot more to learn now. Let's assume he's gotten several years wiser, several years more experience, right? Naturally Enhanced was horrifically bad. And anybody who has looked at it and read it, and yes, someone did send me a free copy, anyone who's looked at it and read it who thinks that it was even remotely decent training is extremely ignorant about training programming. It wasn't even decent. It was flat bad. Okay, it was flat bad. So he put out stuff like that. I mean, he's improving with what he's doing now, but the fact is, a lot of the people who were following him started in with all that nonsense. They didn't make gains, because I've seen all of their supposed gains. None of them made progress. It's a terrible program. One of my regular long-term people came over to me early on several years ago because he bought Naturally Enhanced, ran it, and I've had enough conversations with the guy, and he said it was terrible. I made no progress. I quit following him and came over to you and started making progress on your free programs. And it's just that simple, guys. It is that simple. It was a bad program. And so most of the people who are following him are going to be novice lifters who are really inexperienced. They don't know how to see through smoke and mirrors, and they don't want to train their legs, okay? And that's a pretty common demographic. So if you come over, though, and you see the SlingShot bench as anything but a yellow SlingShot bench, and you think that that means something besides a 340 bench, you don't understand training, and you don't understand these various conjugate lifts, okay? You've got to understand they are not always carry-overable. In other words, what you're probably going to find is he benches about 340, right? He benches about 340, and that's respectable right now. But we know recently that's what he's benched. Okay, so we call that his current baseline max. If he benches 340 that way, and he benches 420 with the yellow, it's fair to assume, because his bench might have gone up a little since then, it's fair to assume that people who have fairly strong triceps, okay, people who have strong triceps probably get 70 to 80 pounds out of that yellow SlingShot. It's probably pretty reasonable to assess that. So it's not that we would say, oh man, he got a 420, but it doesn't matter what the bottom is, it's 420 lockout, whatever. You can call it whatever you want. What it means is that it's a 420 yellow SlingShot bench. It doesn't mean he's a 380 bencher. It doesn't mean he's a 390 bencher. He's still probably a 340, possibly a 350 bencher. And that's very respectable considering his body weight and size. That is not an unrespectable bench. I'm not dissing on that. But this has always been the problem, is that he doesn't transfer that over, and it is still a bit of showboating for novice lifters who don't know any better. And that's all I'm saying. I'm trying to educate the more novice lifter that is not even close to being a 400-pound bench press. It is not the equivalent. He is a mid-300s bencher. And I'm not knocking that. That's been the thing. You know, it's like if Alex just kind of posted his normal numbers and didn't do the goofballery, and this is my 3-inch above the knee rack pull, right? When he's a 500-pound deadlifter at the time. 1,000-pound rack pull. He was a 500-pound deadlifter, okay? Same thing with all the SlingShot board presses and stuff. It's like, okay, you're a mid-300s bencher. You're not a 400 or bencher. But the novice people don't know any better. The same thing. There were people who were like, oh man, look, that high handle 700-pound trap bar deadlift. See, he can deadlift it. No, he's a 500-pound deadlifter. Okay? And if he only talked about his real lifts, it would be actually good. No one would be calling him weak or making fun of it. And that's what people need to understand, the difference. If Alex had just come out at a certain point and said, you know what, I can deadlift 500, I can deadlift 510, I can bench 350, and I weigh whatever, 165. Is anybody going to knock that? Like, is any reasonable person going to knock that? No. Would I knock it? Hell no, I wouldn't. I'd be like, that's pretty good, dude. That's real solid. Respect. Okay? Had he just done that all the years ago through all this nonsense, most of us would have been like, yeah, man, shit, this dude's doing real good. Right? But instead, it's look at my 700-pound high-handle trap bar. You're a 500-pound deadlifter. Okay? Look at my 400-pound board press with a SlingShot. Dude, you're a 330 bencher. Okay? At that time. So that's the problem with all of it, is that when people start to think that it means something more than it actually does, or that actually is a comparable lift to something else, here's what I can tell you that we now know. We now know, here's what we can infer. We know he's a 340 bencher as of recently. So therefore, we can infer that a 340-pound bencher can do 420 with that yellow SlingShot. That's what we can infer. Nothing more, nothing less. Although I did notice his overhead press has gone up a little bit, and there's a little bit of that face bloat coming back. It looks like brother's hitting them pinkies a little bit. And old school guys know what pinkies are. For the rest of you, you're going to have to figure it out. But yeah, those pinkies are kicking in. So, you know, his pressing strength is probably going to start going up a little bit. It's going to start drifting back up, man. I mean, those pinkies work. There's no doubt about that. I should probably get my hands on some myself. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.